My name is Elena Vasquez, and before yesterday, the most dangerous thing anyone thought I could do was accidentally over-sweeten their coffee. At 26, with my grandmother's rosary always hanging around my neck and flour perpetually dusted under my fingernails, I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be, a small-town baker's daughter who'd never hurt a fly. That assumption nearly got 12 people killed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the morning everything changed. Tuesday, October 15th, in the sleepy mountain town of Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Population 3,847, where the biggest excitement usually comes from Mrs. Henderson's cat getting stuck in the old oak tree behind the post office. I was arranging fresh cinnamon rolls in the display case of Abuela's kitchen, the bakery my family had run for 3 generations, when the bell above the door chimed. The sound was different somehow, urgent, metallic. Not the gentle tinkle of Mrs. Patterson coming for her daily sourdough, or Tommy Martinez grabbing donuts before school. "We're closed," I called without looking up, focused on making sure each roll sat perfectly in its place. It was 5:47 a.m., still 13 minutes before we officially opened. In Cedar Ridge, 13 minutes might as well be 13 hours. We operated on mountain time, which meant everything happened when it was supposed to, not a second sooner. Elena Vasquez? The voice made my blood freeze. Male, professional, with the kind of careful pronunciation that suggested the speaker had spent time learning to blend into small American towns. I straightened slowly, my hand instinctively moving to the rosary at my throat, a habit I'd developed during my childhood, when touching the worn silver cross helped calm my racing thoughts. 3 men stood inside my bakery. They wore ordinary clothes, jeans, flannel shirts, work boots, but something was wrong with the picture. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning exits and shadows. Their stance was too balanced, too ready. Most telling of all, the lead man's shirt had been ironed recently, but the creases were wrong, as if someone unfamiliar with American casual wear had tried to copy what they'd seen in movies. "I'm Elena," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But we don't open until 6. There's a 24-hour diner about 15 miles down. We know who you are." The man stepped closer, and I caught the slight bulge under his left armpit. "Armed. More specifically, we know who you used to be." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression confused and innocent. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake. I've lived in Cedar Ridge my whole life. I run a bakery." "I don't know what, Lieutenant." Elena Vasquez, the second man interrupted, consulting a phone screen. "Army intelligence. Specialized in deep cover operations and elimination of high-value targets. 12 confirmed kills in 4 countries, all completed with such precision that most were ruled accidental deaths or natural causes." The kitchen timer chose that moment to ding, signaling that my morning batch of conscious was ready. The sound seemed absurdly normal against the backdrop of my carefully constructed life unraveling. I'd spent 4 years building Elena the baker, the quiet granddaughter who'd returned home to help with the family business after her grandmother's heart attack. Elena who taught Sunday school, who remembered everyone's birthday, who'd never traveled farther than Denver. Elena who definitely didn't have 12 kills to her name. "You have me confused with someone else," I said, moving toward the timer with deliberate calm. If I could reach the kitchen, I had options. The back door, for one. But also the knife block, and the cast-iron skillet that had been in my family for 60 years. My grandmother's expecting me to bring her breakfast soon. She gets worried if I'm late. The truth was, Abuela had been dead for 18 months. But these men wouldn't know that, couldn't know that, unless their intelligence was far better than I hoped. The lead man smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Your grandmother Rosa Vasquez died on March 3 last year. Heart failure at Cedar Ridge Memorial Hospital. You were holding her hand." He paused, letting the impact sink in. "We've been watching you longer than you think, Lieutenant." My blood turned to ice water. They knew. Somehow, despite every precaution, every carefully crafted detail of my cover story, they knew exactly who I was. Which meant they also knew what I was capable of. "What do you want?" The pretense fell away from my voice like a discarded mask. No point maintaining the charade now. Our employer has need of your particular skills, the third man spoke for the first time. Russian accent, barely perceptible but there. One final job. Clean, precise, no questions asked. The kind of work you were famous for. I'm retired. I reached behind me, feeling for the kitchen door. I don't do that anymore. Everyone has a price, Lieutenant. The lead man nodded to his companions, who began moving to flank me. Money, threats, leverage. We're prepared to offer all three. That's when I noticed the tablet in his other hand, angled so I could see the screen. Security camera footage from the elementary school 3 blocks away. Children arriving for another ordinary Tuesday, their backpacks bouncing as they ran toward the playground. Among them, I recognized Tommy Martinez, Mrs. Martinez's 8-year-old grandson, who came into the bakery every Friday for chocolate chip cookies and always remembered to say, please, and thank you, in Spanish, the way his grandmother had taught him. 12 targets, the man continued conversationally. High security location, significant collateral damage potential if handled incorrectly. Our employer prefers subtlety. The kind of precision work that made you legendary. And if I refuse? He tilted the tablet, showing me more camera feeds. The school, the post office, the diner where half the town gathered for coffee every morning. Cedar Ridge is a small town, Lieutenant. Accidents happen so easily in small towns. Gas leaks, structural failures, unfortunate incidents with school. Buses on mountain roads, the threat hung in the air like smoke from burnt bread. They weren't just recruiting me, they were offering me a choice between participating in whatever operation they had planned, or watching my adopted hometown become collateral damage. I thought about Mrs. Patterson, who still brought me vegetables from her garden every Thursday. About Father Miguel, who'd welcomed me into his congregation without question when I'd arrived 4 years ago, broken and looking for somewhere to disappear. About the teenagers who hung out behind the bakery after school, thinking they were being rebellious by smoking cigarettes that I pretended not to notice. These people had become my family in ways I'd never expected. The life I'd built here wasn't just a cover story anymore, it was real. It was home. When? I asked quietly, the lead man's smile widened. Tonight. Midnight. There's a compound in the mountains, about 40 miles north. Private security, but nothing you can't handle. The targets? Businessmen. International traders who've overstepped certain boundaries. Clean eliminations, no survivors, minimal evidence. Your specialty. I nodded slowly, my mind already shifting gears. For years of peaceful mornings in the bakery, of Sunday services and community potlucks, hadn't erased the skills that had once made me one of the Army's most effective operators. They were still there, waiting beneath the surface like embers under ash, but these men had made one crucial mistake. They thought they were dealing with the same Elena Vasquez who'd walked away from military service 4 years ago, the one who'd been willing to disappear rather than continue killing for a government that saw her as nothing more than a useful weapon. They didn't realize that having something worth protecting had made me infinitely more dangerous. I'll need equipment, I said. And details about the compound. Security rotations, structural plans, anything you have already prepared. The man set a duffel bag on my counter, right next to the morning's fresh pastries. The contrast was jarring. Tools of death beside symbols of life and community. Everything you'll need is there. We'll be monitoring the situation, of course. Any deviation from the plan, any attempt to contact authorities. He gestured again at the tablet, where children continued playing in blissful ignorance of the conversation taking place 3 blocks away. Understood, I said. Midnight. 40 miles north. 12 targets, clean eliminations. The men left as suddenly as they'd arrived, the bell above the door chiming once more in their wake. I stood alone in my bakery, surrounded by the familiar scents of cinnamon and brown sugar, staring at the duffel bag that contained the tools of my former profession. The timer dinged again, my conscience were starting to burn. I moved mechanically, pulling the sweet bread from the oven, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. 12 targets. Midnight. A return to the life I'd sworn to leave behind, but as I set the cooling conscience on the rack, I found myself smiling grimly. These men thought they understood the game they were playing. They thought they'd cornered a Retired operative who'd grown soft after 4 years of civilian life. They had no idea they'd just given Elena the baker a perfect reason to become Elena the hunter once more, and this time, I wasn't working for anyone else's agenda. I was protecting home. The duffel bag sat on my kitchen counter like a sleeping serpent. Its contents a stark reminder of who I used to be. I unzipped it with steady hands, cataloging the equipment inside: suppressed pistol, tactical knife, night vision goggles, climbing gear, and enough C4 to level a small building. Professional grade, military specification. Whoever these people were, they had serious connections, but as I examined each item, a cold realization settled in my stomach. This wasn't a recruitment, it was a setup. The pistol's serial numbers had been filed off, but I could still make out traces of the original markings. Standard issue from a batch that had gone missing from Fort Bragg 2 years ago. The knife bore microscopic scratches that suggested recent use, with residue that could easily be traced back to previous crimes. Even the C4 had a chemical signature that would point investigators toward black market dealers I'd never heard of. Someone wanted Elena Vasquez to disappear permanently, and they were planning to frame me for whatever was about to happen at that compound. I closed the bag and walked to the window, watching Cedar Ridge wake up in the early morning light. Mrs. Patterson was already in her garden, tending to the last tomatoes before winter set in. The school bus was making its rounds, collecting children who trusted that their world was safe. Father Miguel was unlocking the church, preparing for morning prayer. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number: "Remember, we're watching. Midnight. No deviations." I typed back: "Understood. Will complete mission as specified," but my fingers were already moving to another contact, one I hadn't used in 4 years. Marcus Chen, former Delta Force, now running a private security firm in Denver. If anyone could help me figure out what was really happening, it was him. It's Elena. Need immediate consultation. Life or death. Can you get to Cedar Ridge? His response came within minutes: "On my way." ETA 90 minutes. While I waited, I did what Elena the baker would do on any normal Tuesday. I opened the shop, served coffee and pastries to the morning regulars, smiled and made small talk about the weather. But underneath the normalcy, my mind was racing through scenarios and possibilities. The bell chimed at 8:15, and Marcus walked in looking exactly like what he was, a dangerous man trying very hard to appear harmless. Flannel shirt, hiking boots, tourist's camera around his neck. To anyone watching, he was just another leaf peeper passing through town. "Elena," he said, accepting the coffee I handed him. "You look domestic." "It suits me." I kept my voice light, aware that we might be monitored. "How's the family?" "Good. Kids are growing up fast." "Listen, I'm thinking about doing some hiking up in the mountains. You know any good trails?" Translation: We need to talk privately about whatever has you spooked. "There's a beautiful spot about 2 miles up Canyon Road," I said, handing him a bag of pastries. "Perfect for a picnic. The old mining cabin up there has amazing views." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the abandoned cabin that had become my private retreat over the past 4 years. Marcus had swept the area for listening devices while I explained the morning's events. "They're not recruiting you," he said grimly, examining photos I'd taken of the equipment. "This is an elimination op. They want you dead, but they want it to look like you went rogue first." That's what I figured. But why? I've been ghost for 4 years. Deep cover, no contact with anyone from the old life. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountain peaks. "Remember Operation Nightfall? Syria, about 5 years ago?" My blood chilled. Nightfall had been one of my last missions, a supposedly routine intelligence gathering operation that had gone sideways when we discovered our targets weren't enemy combatants, but American assets who'd learned too much about their handler's side business. "The arms dealer," I whispered. "Kozlov." Viktor Kozlov's organization never forgot what happened to their Syrian operation. Word is, they've spent years tracking down everyone involved. 3 of our team members have died in the past 18 months, all made to look like accidents. Or suicides. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. They want me to walk into that compound tonight so they can kill me and make it look like I was assassinating innocent businessmen. Clean up their revenge and discredit me in one move. "Gets worse," Marcus said, pulling up something on his phone. I ran a quick check on that compound location. It's not some criminal hideout, it's a corporate retreat center. Legitimate. Business conference happening tonight. About 50 attendees, including some high-profile politicians and CEOs. My hands clenched into fists. They want me to massacre innocent people. No, Marcus said quietly. They want it to look like you massacred innocent people. My guess is they've got their own team ready to do the actual killing. You walk in with their planted evidence, they take you out, then execute their real plan and pin everything on the rogue operative who snapped. I thought about the children at Cedar Ridge Elementary, the threat hanging over my adopted town. And if I don't show up? They follow through on their threat to Cedar Ridge. Small town tragedy, gas explosion, or something equally untraceable. Kozlov gets his revenge, eliminates any witnesses, and sends a message to anyone else who might cross him. The morning sun streamed through the cabin's dirty windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to simply walk away, take Marcus's truck and disappear into the wilderness, leave Cedar Ridge and Elena the baker behind forever, but Mrs. Patterson's face appeared in my mind, weathered hands offering me fresh vegetables. Father Miguel's gentle smile when I'd finally worked up the courage to take communion. Tommy Martinez practicing his Spanish with me while his grandmother shopped for bread. I couldn't abandon them. But I also couldn't walk into an obvious trap. What? If there was a third option? I said slowly. What if Elena the baker never showed up at that compound, but someone else did? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You said Kozlov's people have been hunting our old team. How many of them are still active? Maybe a dozen operators, plus support staff. Why? I smiled, feeling the familiar cold calm that used to settle over me before difficult missions. Because I think it's time to deliver their package personally. The plan we hatched over the next hour was audacious, dangerous, and completely insane. It was also the only way to save both Cedar Ridge and the innocent people at that corporate retreat. Marcus would use his security firm's resources to track down the real location of Kozlov's operation, not the compound they wanted me to hit, but the staging area where they were coordinating tonight's frame job. Meanwhile, I would prepare a different kind of delivery for our morning visitors. By noon, I was back in the bakery, working on what would either be my masterpiece or my epitaph. The afternoon crowd found me in unusually good spirits, humming old Spanish lullabies while I kneaded dough and decorated cakes. You seem happy today, Mija, said Mrs. Martinez, picking up her weekly order of empanadas. It's good to see you smile. Just a good day, I told her, which wasn't entirely a lie. It felt good to be using my skills again, even if the context was terrifying. The three men returned at 4 p.m., just as I was closing up shop. Same casual clothes, same careful surveillance of the area. But this time, I was ready for them. Everything prepared, the lead man asked. Better than you know, I replied, hefting a large white box tied with ribbon. I made you something. Traditional Mexican farewell cookies. For luck. His eyes narrowed suspiciously, but he didn't protest when I set the box on the counter between us. The mission parameters remain the same, he said. Midnight. 12 targets. Clean eliminations. Of course. I smiled my sweetest baker smile. I never disappoint a customer. After they left, I waited exactly 17 minutes, long enough for them to reach the main road. Before triggering the remote detonator, the explosion was small, controlled, designed more for shock than destruction. But it was enough to disable their vehicle and send a very clear message. Elena Vasquez was no longer playing by their rules. Marcus called at 6 p.m. Found them. Abandoned ski lodge about 30 miles north. Looks like they've got a full tactical team, plus surveillance equipment monitoring the corporate retreat. How many? 12 operators, plus support staff. Maybe 18 total. 12 operators. The same number they'd wanted me to kill at the retreat. Poetic justice had a certain appeal. Can you get me close without being detected? Elena, you can't take on 18 trained killers by yourself. Let me call in some favors, get a proper team. No time, I cut him off. They'll know their advance team is compromised. They'll either move up their timeline or scatter. It has to be tonight. And it has to be me. This is suicide. Maybe, I admitted. But it's my choice to make. The old Elena would have been terrified at the prospect of facing such overwhelming odds. But 4 years of peace had given me something I'd never had before, a reason to fight. That went beyond duty or orders. I wasn't killing for my country or my unit or some abstract political goal. I was protecting home. The ski lodge sat dark against the mountainside, its windows glowing like scattered stars. Marcus had dropped me off 2 miles away, along with better equipment than what the morning's visitors had provided. Real military gear, untraceable and reliable. Moving through the forest felt like slipping on comfortable old clothes. My body remembered the rhythm of tactical movement, the careful placement of each footstep, the constant awareness of sight lines and cover. The night vision goggles turned the world into a green-tinged landscape of shadows and possibilities. The perimeter was well defended but predictable. Professional, but not imaginative. These were soldiers following standard protocols, not artists. Adapting to unique circumstances, the first guard went down silently, a precisely applied sleeper hold that would keep him unconscious for hours. I dragged his body into the underbrush and continued my approach. The second and third guards were stationed at the lodge's rear entrance, their attention focused outward toward potential external threats. They never saw me coming inside. The lodge hummed with electronic equipment and quiet conversation. Through the night vision scope, I could see the full scope of their operation: surveillance feeds from the corporate retreat, communication equipment, weapons caches, and a detailed timeline for their planned massacre. They intended to hit the retreat at 12:30 a.m., after I was supposed to be dead in the compound. Clean eliminations of 50 innocent people, blamed on a rogue American operative who'd finally snapped. The 4th through 7th targets were clustered around the communication center, monitoring feeds and coordinating with their insertion team. I moved like smoke through the lodge's corridors, my grandmother's rosary tucked safely against my chest as I worked. The tactical knife was whisper quiet, precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Each strike was calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum noise. These weren't passionate kills born from anger or fear, they were professional eliminations, clean and quick. The 8th target was alone in a side room, reviewing building plans for the corporate retreat. He looked up from his laptop just as my blade found the junction between his neck and shoulder. His eyes widened in surprise, then went dark. 9 and 10 were easier, isolated positions, predictable patrol routes. I moved between them like a shadow, striking and disappearing before they could raise an alarm. The 11th target was their communications specialist, a thin man with nervous energy who kept checking his watch. When he finally noticed that his perimeter teams weren't checking in, it was too late. That left only the leader, the same man who'd walked into my bakery that morning with threats against Cedar Ridge. I found him in the lodge's main room, standing before a wall of monitors, showing different angles of the corporate retreat. He was speaking quietly into a headset, coordinating with his insertion team. Falcon 1, this is Control. Primary asset should be in position now. Begin your approach. I stepped out of the shadows behind him, the suppressed pistol steady in my hands. Control, this is Elena Vasquez. Your primary asset has a message. He spun around, his hand moving toward the pistol at his hip, but I was already too close. The muzzle of my weapon pressed against his forehead, and his hand froze halfway to his gun. Your employer made a mistake, I said quietly. He assumed that 4 years of civilian life had made me soft. That Elena the baker had forgotten how to be Elena the hunter. His eyes darted toward the communication equipment, calculating whether he could signal his team before I pulled the trigger. Don't, I advised. 12 of your people are already dead. Your insertion team is about to walk into a building full of FBI agents. I called in an anonymous tip about a terrorist threat. And in about 30 seconds, this entire operation is going to disappear in a gas explosion that will look completely accidental. His face went pale. You're bluffing. I smiled, thinking of Tommy Martinez and his careful Spanish, of Mrs. Patterson's garden vegetables, of Father Miguel's gentle sermons about protecting the innocent. I'm a baker, I said. I know exactly how much heat it takes to create the perfect explosion. The timer I'd set when I entered the building reached 0. The lodge's gas lines, carefully sabotaged during my infiltration, ignited in a controlled explosion that would leave investigators with nothing but evidence of a tragic accident, but by then, I was already gone, melting back into the forest with the same silence that had brought me there. Dawn found me back in my bakery, mixing dough for the morning's bread. The news would report a terrible accident at an abandoned ski lodge, a gas leak that had killed 18 foreign nationals who'd been using the facility for some kind of corporate retreat. The FBI would find evidence of a planned terrorist attack on the legitimate corporate retreat, but the threat would be neutralized before it could be carried out. The surviving records would point toward Viktor Kozlov's organization, finally giving authorities the evidence they needed to dismantle his network. Marcus called at 7 a.m. "It's done," he said simply. "Kozlov's people are finished. The threat to Cedar Ridge is over." "Good," I said, pulling fresh conchas from the oven. "I have customers coming in soon." "Elena?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Are you okay? With everything that happened?" I thought about the 12 people I'd killed. In the space of an hour. 12 professionals who'd threatened innocent lives, who'd planned to massacre 50 people to cover their revenge against me. 12 targets eliminated with the kind of precision that had once made me legendary. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I told him. The bell above my door chimed at exactly 6 a.m., and Mrs. Patterson walked in for her daily sourdough. "Good morning, Elena," she said with a warm smile. "You look rested. Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby," I replied, handing her the bread still warm from the oven. "Sometimes the best sleep comes after you've finished a difficult recipe." She nodded knowingly. "The most complicated dishes always turn out the best, don't they? When you put your whole heart into the work." "Yes," I agreed, watching through the window as Cedar Ridge continued its peaceful morning routine. Children walked to school, adults headed to work, elderly couples sat on their porches with coffee and newspapers. All of them safe, all of them unaware of the danger that had passed in the night. They certainly do. Elena the baker had learned something important during her brief return to being Elena the hunter. Some recipes are worth any price to perfect. And the recipe for protecting home, for keeping the people you love safe from those who would harm them, was the most important one of all. I touched my grandmother's rosary, said a quick prayer for the dead, and began preparing for another ordinary day in the most extraordinary life I'd ever lived. After all, I had bread to bake, and customers to serve, and a community to protect. Some things never changed. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.